Okay, let's start. Number 1. Yeqon. You already know the story, or you think you do. 200 angels called the Watchers look down from heaven, see that the daughters of men are beautiful, and decide to come down. They gather on the summit of Mount Hermon, they swear an oath, they take human wives, and they father the giants. And the being everyone blames, the ringleader, the one whose name gets said in every video and every sermon, is Semjaza. He's the chief. He's where the story starts. Except he isn't. Because the Book of Enoch, in a chapter almost nobody reads, names a being who came before him. A being who moved him. Here's the first thing you need to know, and it's the frame for this entire list. When people say the Book of Enoch, they usually mean one book, the famous one, the part everyone quotes. But the Enoch tradition is bigger than that. There's the Book of the Giants, dug out of the ground with the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's a second Book of Enoch, the Slavonic one, and a third, the Hebrew one. There's the Book of Jubilees. Together they name the beings the famous version only gestures at, and they describe sealings, prisons, and bindings the popular story never mentions. Everything on this list comes from that deeper layer. These are the ones the channels skip. So back to the being before the leader. Chapter 69 of the Book of Enoch keeps a short, strange roster of names, and the very first one stops you cold. His name is Yeqon. And here is what the text says he did. He is the one who led astray all the sons of God, and brought them down to the earth, and led them astray through the daughters of men. Read that slowly. He led astray all the sons of God. Not one of them, and not himself alone, but the whole 200. The 200 didn't wake up one morning and decide to fall. Somebody worked on them. Somebody put the idea in front of them, turned them toward the daughters of men, and walked them to the edge. That somebody was Yeqon, and he did it before Semjaza ever stood on that mountain. Sit with what that does to the story you were told. Semjaza gets treated as the source, the patient zero of the whole catastrophe, but Semjaza is already a symptom. He's the one who acted, not the one who started it. Yeqon is the hand behind the leader, the seducer of the seducers, the being who corrupted the corruptors. Every single thing the Watchers did after that, the wives, the giants, the forbidden teaching, the ruin of the ancient world, traces back one more link than anyone ever traces it. It traces back to Yeqon. You'd think a detail like that, the actual first cause of the fall of the angels, would be the headline. Instead, it sits in one line of one chapter that most people never open. And notice what kind of crime this is, because it sets the tone for the deep cuts coming. Yeqon didn't teach a weapon, he didn't forge a sword, or paint a face, or chart a star. His whole crime was influence, persuasion, getting inside the minds of holy beings and turning them, quietly, until 200 of them agreed to do the one thing they were created never to do. He's the being who proves that the most dangerous thing in the story isn't a blade. It's a voice that knows exactly what to say. Now here's where it starts getting strange, and here's the thread that runs under all 10 of these. If Yeqon is the one who moved the leader, then think about what sealing actually accomplishes in this story. You can bind Semjaza. You can bury the 200 under the hills of the earth. But the corruption didn't start with them. It started one link earlier, with the being who turned them, and by the time anyone gets sealed, the idea is already loose in the world. The seduction already worked. That's the question this whole list is built on, and it doesn't get answered until the very last being. If God sealed all of them, why is the world still so full of what they made? Hold on to that. The chain starts further back than anyone admits, and it may not end where the sealing does. Yeqon corrupted the angels with a whisper. The angels fathered the giants. And you'd think giants, the biggest and strongest things that ever walked the earth, would be too busy crushing the world to be afraid of anything. But 2 of them, brothers, sons of one of the fallen, started having the same dream, over and over, and it showed them, in detail, exactly how the world was going to end, and exactly what was going to happen to them. What did the giants see coming that the humans around them couldn't? Number 2. Ohia and Hahia. Picture the assembly of the giants. Not a fairy tale, a gathering of enormous, violent beings, the offspring of the fallen angels and human women, the ones the Book of Enoch says devoured the labor of men and then turned on men themselves. They are the apex of everything wrong with the ancient world, afraid of nothing, answerable to no one. And 2 of them, 2 brothers named Ohia and Haya, keep waking up shaking because they've been having the same dream, and the dream is about them. This comes from the Book of the Giants, the one recovered from the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Enoch tradition's own account of what the Watcher's children were and what became of them. The famous book gives the giants a single collective fate and moves on. The Book of the Giants gives them names, voices, and a story. Ohia and Hahia are the sons of Shemihaza, the leader of the fallen angels himself, so these are not minor monsters. These are the crown princes of the giants, the firstborn of the rebellion, and they are the ones the dreams come for. Haya stands up in the assembly and describes what he saw. A garden, or a grove, vast and green, tended and watered, and then the water turns. It rises, it floods, it drowns the whole garden, and fire comes with it, burning what the water doesn't take, until everything green and growing is gone, and only a ruin is left. Ohia has his own version, and it lands the same way. The vision is not subtle. Something is coming that will wipe the world clean, water and fire together, and nothing that grew in the old ground survives it. The giants, sitting in that assembly, are the garden. Here's where it gets strange. These are beings that could tear down a city wall with their hands, and they cannot do a single thing about what they're seeing. The dream doesn't come with an escape. It comes with a verdict. And the most human thing in the entire Book of the Giants is the reaction of these inhuman creatures to it, because they do exactly what a person would do. They argue about what it means. They look for a way out. They send for an interpreter, hoping someone will tell them they read it wrong. But here's the detail that everyone missed at the time. The giants aren't dreaming a warning they can act on. They're dreaming a sentence that's already been passed. The flood was never a threat they could dodge. It was a date on a calendar, and they were on the wrong side of it. Think about what that means for who these beings are. We tend to imagine the giants as pure appetite, mountains of muscle with nothing behind the eyes. The Book of the Giants says no, they knew. They understood before the water came that they were the thing the world was going to be scrubbed of. Ohia and Hahia carried that knowledge around inside the assembly, the certainty of their own erasure, and it changes how you see all of them. The giants weren't just destroyed. They were destroyed knowing it was coming, watching it approach in their sleep, night after night, unable to stop it. And that fate is total. When the flood comes, the bodies of the giants die, and the Book of Enoch says their spirits don't rest. They become the evil spirits that trouble the earth, bound to wander until the judgment. So even the erasure isn't clean. Ohia and Hahia dreamed the water and the fire, and then they lived it, and then whatever was left of them was scattered into the world as something worse. The crown princes of the giants got the clearest look at the end, and it did them no good at all. The giants at least understood they'd done something to earn the water. They were the proof of the crime, the living evidence of what the angels had done, and some part of them knew it. But the next three beings on this list never touched a human woman. They never fathered a giant. They never came down to the earth at all. They were thrown out of heaven, cast down from the throne room itself, for something they said out loud in front of God. So what can an angel possibly say, standing in the presence of the Almighty, that gets it hurled down to the earth? Number 3. Uzzah, Azza, and Azael. Imagine the throne room of heaven at the exact moment a human being is promoted above the angels, not welcomed in, promoted, set over them. His name was Enoch, the same Enoch these books are named after, and the Hebrew Book of Enoch, the third one, tells you what happened to him at the top of that journey. He was transformed. He was made into the great angel Metatron, given a throne of his own, given authority over the heavenly host, a man born of a woman raised higher than beings who had served God since before the world existed. And 3 of those beings looked at that and refused to accept it. Their names are Uzzah, Azza, and Azael, and what they did had nothing to do with lust, or magic, or chasing women down to the earth. They objected. They stood in the throne room and argued that this was wrong. Why, they said, should a human, a creature of flesh, born of a woman, made of the dust of the earth, be exalted above us? We are older, we are pure spirit, we were here first. And for that protest, for saying no to a man's promotion, they were cast down. Stop and notice how different this fall is from every version you've heard. The famous story is about angels who wanted something forbidden and reached for it. This is about angels who wanted nothing, took nothing, touched no one, and fell anyway, because they questioned a decision made from the throne. In the older layers of the tradition, one of these 3, Azza, is tied back to the leader of the Watchers himself, which is why you almost never hear this told straight. Forget the descent for wives. The deep-cut version is 3 angels thrown out of heaven for talking back. And here's the part that makes it land. Their objection wasn't stupid. On paper, they had a point. They were, by every measure the ancient mind understood, greater than a man, older, purer, closer to the throne. They watched a human get lifted over their heads, and they said what a lot of beings were probably thinking. The difference is that they said it, and the saying of it was the sin. Not the thought, but the refusal to bow. Heaven, in this book, does not run on merit or seniority. It runs on submission, and the three who wouldn't submit went down. If a version of the Enoch story where 3 angels get hurled out of heaven for refusing to kneel to a human is new to you, that alone should tell you how much of this tradition never makes it into the usual videos. Subscribe, because the next 7 are the parts even the famous Book of Enoch only whispers, and the strangest names are still coming. That's the only ask. Now back to the throne room, because the fall of these 3 opens up a question the rest of the list runs on. What gets you sealed in these books isn't one thing. It isn't only lust, and it isn't only forbidden knowledge. Uzzah, Asa, and Azael fell for pride, for the refusal to accept a human raised above them. The giants fell simply for existing, for being born of a union that was never supposed to happen. Yeqon fell for a whisper. The more you read, the clearer it gets that this is not a simple story about angels who wanted women. It's a catalog of every way a being can break with heaven, and every way heaven answers, which is almost always the same: down, under, away, sealed, until the reckoning. Those 3 fell for what they said in the open, in front of God. The next being fell for what he said in secret. He didn't shout in the throne room. He went quietly from angel to angel, one at a time, and gave them the reasoning, the argument, the cold logic that made falling feel not just possible but sensible. Until 200 of them had talked themselves into an oath, none of them would have sworn alone. Who was the voice that made the case for the fall? Number 4. Asbeel. Go back to Yeqon for a second, the being from item 1, the one who led the angels astray. He lit the want. He turned the watchers toward the daughters of men and made them desire what they were never supposed to touch. But a desire isn't a plan. Wanting something forbidden and actually organizing 200 beings to go get it are 2 very different things, and between the wanting and the doing, there's a second name in that same strange chapter of the Book of Enoch. His name is Asbeel, and where Yeqon supplied the hunger, Asbeel supplied the strategy. The text is short and precise about him. Asbeel imparted to the holy sons of God evil counsel, and led them astray so that they defiled their bodies with the daughters of men. Counsel. That's the word that matters. Not temptation, counsel, advice. A plan of action. Asbeel is the being who sat the angels down, after Yeqon had them wanting it, and told them how to justify it, how to go about it, how to bind themselves together so no one could back out. He's the consigliere of the whole catastrophe, the one who took a dangerous impulse and turned it into an operation. Think about how much of the story that one word explains. The fall of the Watchers didn't happen as a mob, it happened as an operation. 200 angels descending together, swearing a mutual oath on a mountaintop, dividing themselves into groups with named leaders, each one assigned a teaching to bring down to mankind. That's not the behavior of beings acting on raw impulse. That's a structure. That's a plan. And a plan has an author. Yeqon made them want it, but Asbeel is the one who made it workable, who gave the fall its shape and its steps, who turned a shared weakness into a coordinated rebellion. Here's where it gets strange. Of all the crimes in these books, Asbeel's is the one that feels most familiar, because it's the one that still happens. The being who never does the deed himself, who never gets his own hands dirty, who simply provides the reasoning that lets everyone else act. He doesn't take a wife. He doesn't teach a weapon. He talks. He advises. He hands over the argument that makes a terrible thing feel like a reasonable next step, and then he stands back while 200 others carry it out. In any human court, the council who planned the crime is as guilty as the ones who committed it, and the Book of Enoch agrees. Asbeel goes into the ceiling with the rest. And notice what kind of danger a being like Asbeel represents, because it's not the kind you can see coming, a sword you can watch, a giant you can run from, but bad counsel arrives as help. It comes dressed as reason, as the sensible option, as the smart move everyone can agree on. Asbeel's whole method was to make the worst possible decision feel like the obvious one, and 200 beings who had never broken a single commandment walked straight off the edge because the argument was good. That's why the sealing of a being like this matters. You're not locking away a monster here. You're locking away a voice that could talk anyone into anything, given enough time and the right words. The Watchers weren't dragged down. They were convinced. And the being who convinced them is exactly the kind you'd least want back in circulation, because he doesn't force anyone. He just makes the fall sound smart. That's the quiet horror of Asbeel. He proves that in this story, the fall of 200 holy beings didn't require a war, or a weapon, or a moment of overwhelming temptation. The most destructive force in the whole descent turned out to be an argument, made patiently, one angel at a time, until falling felt like the reasonable thing to do. And that's the pair, standing at the head of the whole thing. Yeqon the seducer, and Asbeel the strategist, the want and the way. Between them, they engineered the fall before a single angel set foot on Mount Hermon, and both of them are names you've almost certainly never heard, because the story always starts too late, at the descent itself, long after the real work of corruption was already done. By the time Semjaza is standing on that summit making the others swear, Yeqon and Asbeel have already won. So far every being on this list wanted something on the ground. Yeqon wanted the angels turned. Asbeel wanted the plan carried out. The giants wanted to survive the water. The three in the throne room wanted their rank protected. Earthbound wants, all of them, even when the ones doing the wanting were angels. The next being wanted something on a completely different scale. He didn't want a woman, or a rank, or a rebellion. He went to an archangel and asked for the single secret that runs the entire universe, the hidden name that holds the sky up and keeps the sea inside its shore. What does a being intend to do with the password to creation itself? Number 5. Asbeel. There's an angel of high glory who wanted the one thing above his rank. Not a woman, not a throne, a word. A single hidden name, kept secret at the top of heaven, and this being decided he had to have it, because of what the name could do. His name in the Book of Enoch is Asbeel, though the text says that wasn't his first name. Before all this, he was called Becca. And what Asbeel wanted is, without exaggeration, the most dangerous thing any being on this list ever reached for. To understand it, you have to understand what the name is. The Book of Enoch describes a hidden oath, a secret name, and it lays out exactly what that name holds together. By this oath, the heaven was suspended before the world was made. By this oath, the earth was founded upon the water. By this oath, the sun and the moon keep their courses and do not stray. By this oath, the stars hold their paths and are called by their names. By this oath, the sea was given its bed, its bounds, the line it cannot cross. Every load-bearing structure of the universe, the sky staying up, the earth staying put, the tides staying inside the shore, all of it rests on one spoken name. It is the password to creation. It is the word that keeps everything from coming apart. And Asbeel, the chief of that oath, went to the archangel Michael and asked him to reveal it. He wanted the hidden name shown to him, so that he could speak it, so that he could use it, so that he could wield the oath himself. Read that back. A fallen being asking for the exact word that suspends the heavens and bounds the sea, so that he can hold it in his own mouth. Every other being on this list wanted to break a rule. Asbeel wanted the control panel. Give a creature like him the name that keeps the sky up, and he decides whether it stays up. Here's where it gets strange, and it's the detail that tells you the whole cosmos knew what was at stake. Michael did not hand it over. The name, called Ake, was placed into Michael's hand and kept there, held by a loyal archangel, specifically out of Asbeel's reach. The most closely guarded object in the entire Enoch tradition turns out to be a word, and the security around it is an archangel's fist. Think about what that says. Of everything the fallen ever wanted, the one thing heaven guarded most carefully was the name, because the name is the only thing whose theft wouldn't corrupt the world. It would unmake it. That was only round one of understanding this being, because now hold Asbeel up against everyone you've met so far. Yeqon wanted the angels turned. Asbeel wanted the plan to work. The giants wanted to survive. Asbeel wanted the source code. Every other crime on this list is a being reaching for something inside creation. A woman, a rank, a piece of forbidden knowledge. Asbeel reached for the thing creation is built out of. He didn't want a bigger share of the world. He wanted the word that decides whether there's a world at all. And the reason he's sealed away, the reason he never got it, is that a being who holds the name that bounds the sea could simply tell the sea to come in. So picture the stakes if a being like that ever got loose with what he was after. Not a flood in one valley, not a plague on one city. The oath that keeps the sun on its course, spoken by something that wants the course broken. The line the sea cannot cross, erased by the mouth that was supposed to guard it. The whole reason the seal on Asbeel matters more than the seal on any sword teacher or star charter is that his crime reached past people entirely. It was aimed at the machinery that holds people, and everything else, in place. Asbeel wanted the name that made the world. The next name on this list you already know, but not like this, because he isn't supposed to be in this book at all. He's the hero of the oldest story humanity ever wrote down, a king two-thirds god who went looking for the secret to living forever. And the Enoch tradition files him not as a hero and not as a king, but as one of the monsters. Who is the legend that the Book of the Giants calls a giant? Number 6. Gilgamesh. You know this name. Even if you've never read a word of it, you know Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk, the two-thirds divine hero of the oldest story in human history, the Epic of Gilgamesh, written on clay tablets more than 4,000 years ago. The man who befriended a wild giant named Enkidu, who killed monsters, who watched his friend die, and went to the ends of the earth, looking for the secret to never dying himself. He is the founding hero of Mesopotamian literature. He is not supposed to be in the Book of Enoch. And yet, dug out of the ground with the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the Aramaic fragments of the Book of the Giants, there he is. Gilgamesh, listed by name as one of the giants. Let that collision land, because it's one of the strangest things in this entire tradition. Two ancient worlds that we keep in separate boxes, Mesopotamian myth on one side and the Hebrew Enoch literature on the other, turn out to touch. The people who wrote that text knew the name Gilgamesh, and they did not treat him as a hero from a neighboring culture's legend. They folded him into their own story as one of the Watcher's children, one of the enormous, doomed offspring of the fallen angels, standing in the assembly of the giants alongside Ohia and Hahia, waiting for the same flood to wipe him off the earth. Think about what that reframing does to a figure you thought you understood. In his own epic, Gilgamesh is the protagonist. He's the one we root for, the king whose grief and whose fear of death make him human despite his size and his strength. In the Qumran version, he's not the protagonist of anything. He's one of the monsters the world is about to be cleansed of. The same being, the same name, cast as the hero in one tradition and as one of the condemned in another, depending entirely on who's holding the pen. To the Enoch writers, Gilgamesh wasn't a king to admire. He was evidence. Here's where it gets strange, in a way that goes deeper than a cameo. Gilgamesh's whole epic is a hunt for immortality, a man refusing to accept that he has to die. And this book drops that exact man into a story whose entire point is that his kind is going to be destroyed no matter what. The being most famous in all of ancient literature for trying to escape death is placed among the giants precisely so that he can't. Whatever Gilgamesh wanted in his own story, in this one he's bound to the same water and fire as every other giant, the same judgment Ohia and Hahia dreamed. The hero who searched the world for a way out gets written into the one book where there is no way out. There's another thread here that makes the crossover even tighter. In his own epic, Gilgamesh's closest companion is Enkidu, a wild man shaped by the gods, enormous, born outside the city, more force of nature than person. The Watcher's offspring in the Book of Enoch are described in almost the same terms, giant beings born of an unnatural union, standing between the human world and something older and wilder. The epic and the Enoch tradition are circling the same ancient anxiety from two directions, the memory of a time when the earth held beings that were too big, too strong, and not entirely human. When the Book of the Giants writes Gilgamesh in as a giant, it's doing something deliberate. It's recognizing him. It's saying, we know what he was, and he was one of these, one of the enormous doomed children of the fallen, no matter what his own people carved about him in stone. And this is the thing the Book of the Giants keeps doing, the pattern that makes it so unlike the tidy version of the story. It doesn't keep the myths of the ancient world at arm's length. It reaches out and pulls them in. It takes the most famous king in the oldest literature on earth and makes him a giant. It absorbs the legends that surrounded it and seals them all under the same sentence, as if to say that every hero, every monster, every larger-than-life name from the world before the flood was really the same thing, the same doomed bloodline, the same children of the fallen. That's what Gilgamesh is doing in this book. He's a claim. The claim is that the story you thought was separate was always part of this one, and that the great kings of the oldest myths were, in the eyes of the Enoch writers, exactly the beings God sent the water to erase. Gilgamesh was bound in the earth with the other giants, one more name on the list of the drowned. But the beings that made the giants, the fallen watchers themselves, weren't all sent down into the ground. Some of them were locked somewhere you would never think to look for a prison, not below you, above you. Inside a darkness held within the sky itself, in a level of heaven you were never meant to see. Where, exactly, do you put an angel that heaven can't allow to stay and can't afford to release? Number 7. Satanael and the Grigori. Pull your eyes up off the ground for a minute, because every being so far has been buried in it, under the hills, in the valleys, in the abyss. The second book of Enoch, the Slavonic one, sends Enoch on a different kind of journey. Not down into the earth, but up, through the layered heavens, one level at a time. And in that ascent he finds a prison nobody looking underground would ever think to check, because it's above their heads the whole time. He finds fallen watchers locked in the sky. The book calls them the Grigori, which just means the watchers, the same order of beings behind the whole story, but here they're shown from a completely different angle. Enoch comes to a heaven filled with darkness, a darkness the text says is greater than any darkness on earth, and inside it he finds prisoners. Angels, hanging, held in that blackness, condemned and waiting. These are watchers who turned away from the Lord, and instead of being sent down to the mountains of the earth, they were sealed into a lightless level of heaven itself, suspended in the dark above the world, aware, guilty, and going nowhere until the judgment. And they have a prince, a name the famous book never gives you, Satanael. In the second book of Enoch, the leader of the fallen goes by a name the popular story never uses. Satanael, the one who rejected the throne of light, who set himself against his maker and drew a host of the Grigori down with him. This is one of the oldest written forms of the idea that would eventually become the figure everyone thinks they know, the adversary, the fallen prince. But here he's specifically Enochic, specifically the chief of these skybound watchers, the being who led the ones now hanging in the darkness of the second heaven. And higher up in the same ascent, the book shows you something even stranger than a prison. Enoch reaches another level of heaven and finds more of the Grigori, and these ones aren't chained in darkness. They're grieving, standing in silence, mourning, their faces down, brothers of the ones who fell, watching the empty places where the fallen used to stand. Enoch actually speaks to them. He tells them to resume the worship they abandoned, to turn back to the liturgy of heaven before it's too late for them too. It's one of the only moments in this entire tradition where a human being stands in front of fallen angels and pleads with them to come back, and some of them are close enough to the edge that the plea still means something. The sky over your head holds more than prisoners. It holds mourners too, angels still a single bad decision away from joining the ones already hanging in the dark, and Enoch's warning to them is the last mercy any of them will be offered. Here's the part that reframes the whole geography of the story. We tend to picture the fallen in one place, a single pit, a single mountain, one prison for all of them. The Enoch tradition doesn't work that way. Some are bound under the earth. Some are chained in the valleys. And some, the Grigori under Satanael, are sealed in the sky, in a darkness folded inside heaven. The ceiling was never one door. It's a whole prison system, running from the abyss under the mountains all the way up into the layers of heaven, with different beings held in different cells, and the popular story only ever shows you one wing of it. And think about what a being like Satanael getting loose would actually mean, because it's a different threat than a giant or a sword teacher. He isn't sealed in the ground where the damage would be local. He's held in the sky, above everything, the prince who rejected the throne of light and took a host down with him. The reason heaven keeps him up there in the dark instead of down in the earth is that his rebellion was never about the ground. It was about the throne. You don't bury a being like that in a mountain. You wall him into the one place he tried to rule. We're 3 beings from the end now, and the last 3 pull this entire chain together into the answer the whole list has been building toward. If you want to actually see how it closes, subscribe, because the algorithm buries videos like this, and the ending is the part that changes how you read all of it. That's the ask. Now, while Enoch was walking through the heavens, meeting the prisoners in the sky, something was happening back on the ground, among the giants, that ties the 2 prisons together. Because the giants below and the watchers above weren't cut off from each other. The children knew what their fathers were, and when the dreams of the flood started coming, the giants needed answers that only one being in the entire world could give. And one of them, a single giant, volunteered to make the journey to get them. Not down, to the fathers in the earth. Not up, to the ones in the sky. Sideways, across the whole width of the world, on foot and then on wings, to reach the one man who could read what the dreams meant. Which giant became a courier, and who was he so desperate to find that he crossed the earth to knock on the door? Number 8. Mahaway. How does a monster end up as a messenger? The giants are dreaming their own destruction, the whole assembly is rattled, and they realize they need an interpreter, someone who can tell them for certain what the visions of water and fire mean. There's only one being who can do it, the scribe who walks with God, Enoch himself, and he doesn't live among them. He's far away, set apart, at the edge of the inhabited world. So the giants pick one of their own to make the journey, and the one they pick is Mahaway. Mahaway comes from the Book of the Giants, and he's the son of one of the fallen Watchers, an angel named Barakel, which makes him another of these giant princes, born of the rebellion. But Mahaway's story has nothing to do with strength. It turns on a mission. The assembly sends him to find Enoch and bring back the meaning of the dreams, and the way he travels is one of the strangest images in the whole tradition. He doesn't walk the whole way. The text describes him rising up, borne aloft, flying across the earth like a bird, passing over the world to reach the place where Enoch is. A giant, in the air, crossing continents to knock on the door of a prophet. Picture that for a second, because it's an image the popular story never gives you. We think of the giants as earthbound mountains of flesh, too heavy to be anything but slow. And here's one of them airborne, flying over the whole width of the world on an errand, carrying the fear of an entire generation of monsters on his back. Mahaway isn't going to conquer anything. He's going to ask a question, the most desperate question his kind can ask. Is the dream true? Is there any way out? He crosses the earth to hear the answer. Here's where it gets strange, and it's a genuinely sad note buried in a book about monsters. Mahaway reaches Enoch, and Enoch reads the dreams, and the answer he gives is the one the giants least wanted. There is no appeal. The vision is true. The flood is coming, the judgment is fixed, and the giants and their fathers are condemned. And then Mahaway has to fly all the way back and deliver that. He carried his people's hope across the world, and what he carried home was a death sentence, confirmed, in writing, from the one being whose word on it was final. The giant courier's entire heroic journey ends with him bringing his own kind, the news that nothing can be done. And the detail that makes it land is that the answer came on tablets. In the Book of the Giants, Enoch's judgment against the Watchers and their children is written out, a document, sent back to the assembly and read aloud to the giants. So Mahaway doesn't just carry back a memory or a rumor. He carries a text, a sealed verdict, the words of the scribe of heaven spelling out that their fathers transgressed and that they, the offspring, will be destroyed for it, with no mercy and no descendants left behind. Picture the scene the fragments describe. A crowd of giants, the strongest beings the world has ever held, standing in silence while one of their own reads them a tablet that says they're finished. The most powerful creatures on earth, receiving a piece of writing that ends them, unable to argue with a single word of it. That's the strange dignity and the strange horror of Mahaway. He did the one thing his kind could still do, which was seek the truth, and the truth turned out to be a sentence already signed. He flew across the whole world for a document that told him his people were over. Think about what that makes Mahaway. Not a villain, exactly. A go-between, caught in the machinery of a judgment far bigger than him, doing the one useful thing a giant could do and finding out it changes nothing. He flew to the edge of the world for an answer, and the answer was that the water was coming for all of them anyway. Of all the beings on this list, Mahaway is the closest to a tragic figure, a monster who spent his last strength trying to save his people and only succeeded in confirming they couldn't be saved. Mahaway crossed the world for a giant. The ninth being on this list came from a completely different world, a different story, an enemy in the oldest epic ever written, and the Enoch tradition dragged him across the border into its own pages, the same way it did with Gilgamesh. He was a monster you were supposed to fear, the guardian of a forbidden forest, killed by a hero, and here he stands again, on the wrong side of the flood, as one more giant. Which creature from another myth got rewritten into this one, this time not as a hero, but as the thing heroes hunt? Number 9. Humbaba. There's a creature in the Epic of Gilgamesh that everyone who reads it remembers. His name is Humbaba, and in that epic he's the terror of the cedar forest, a giant guardian appointed by the gods to protect the sacred trees, with a face like coiled intestines and a roar that meant death. Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu go into the forest, they hunt him down, and they kill him. and it's one of the most famous monster slayings in all of ancient literature. That's his story, over there, in the Mesopotamian world. Except the Book of the Giants reached across and took him too. In the Aramaic fragments from the Dead Sea Scrolls, alongside Gilgamesh, there's a name that scholars read as Hobabish, and it's Humbaba, the same forest monster, pulled into the Enoch tradition as one of the giants. Sit with how strange the pairing is. In his home epic, Humbaba and Gilgamesh are enemies. One hunts, one is hunted. One is the hero, one is the monster he kills to prove himself. And the Book of the Giants takes both of them, the hero and the monster, the killer and his victim, and files them under the same heading, side by side, as two of the Watcher's doomed children, standing in the same assembly, bound for the same flood. Here's where it gets strange. Over in the epic, killing Humbaba is a triumph, a hero's proof, the moment Gilgamesh becomes a legend. Over here, in the Enoch tradition, that whole drama collapses, because Humbaba and Gilgamesh aren't a hero and a monster anymore. They're the same kind of thing. Two giants. Two of the condemned. The great victory of the old epic, the slaying of the forest guardian, turns out, in this telling, to be one monster killing another, both of them already marked for the water, both of them the offspring of the same rebellion. The heroism drains right out of it. What looked like good defeating evil was really just the doomed fighting the doomed. And this is the quiet, unsettling thing the Book of the Giants does with a figure like Humbaba. It flattens the old moral map. In the epic, there's a clear line, the hero on one side, the monster on the other, and the audience knows exactly who to cheer. Drag both of them into the Enoch story, and the line disappears. Humbaba is no longer the exception to the giants, and Gilgamesh is no longer the hero above them. They're both just names on the list of the drowned, two more of the Watcher's children, no more redeemable, and no more damned than each other. The book keeps doing this. It takes the legends the ancient world sorted into heroes and villains, and it seals them all under the same sentence, because in its eyes they were all the same problem. There's something almost frightening about that as a claim, when you sit with it. It's saying that the stories the ancient world told to make sense of itself, the epics of heroes and the monsters they conquered, were all describing one thing from the inside, and the thing was the corruption of the bloodline. The forest guardian and the king who killed him weren't opposites. They were symptoms. And the water that came for the giants didn't sort the good ones from the bad ones, because in this telling there weren't any good ones. There was only the crop that had to be cleared, hero and monster alike, so the world could start again. Humbaba, the terror of the cedar forest in one book, is just one more stalk in that field in this one. That's the whole crowd then, the seducer and the strategist, the angels cast down for pride, the giants who dreamed the end, the one who reached for the name that built the world. The hero king and the forest monster, enemies in one story, and brothers in this one, every last one of them bound, sealed, cast down, or drowned, locked away, top to bottom, sky to abyss. The prison is full and the doors are shut. So here's the question the 10th being finally answers, the one this entire list has been circling since Yeqon. If God bound all of them, if the whole crowd got sealed away under mountain and heaven and flood, then why does the world still feel exactly like a place they're loose in? Why is the corruption still here when the corruptors are all in the ground? There's an answer, and it's written down, and it's worse than a jailbreak. Because the last being on this list didn't escape the sealing. He negotiated an exception to it. Who talked God into leaving a tenth of the evil free, on purpose, by contract, until the end of the world? Number 10. Mastema. The flood is over. The water has done its work. The giants are dead. The world is scrubbed. But the giants left something behind, because when those enormous bodies died, their spirits didn't. The Book of Enoch already told you this. The spirits of the dead giants became the evil spirits of the earth, the demons, homeless and hungry and cruel, and now, in the Book of Jubilees, God moves to finish the job. He orders them rounded up. Every one of these spirits is to be bound and sealed in the place of condemnation, locked away with everything else, so the cleansed world stays clean. And that would have been the end of it. The corruptors sealed, their children drowned, their ghosts imprisoned, the whole chain finally closed. Except one being stepped forward and asked God to stop. His name is Mastema, and in the Book of Jubilees he's the prince of these spirits, the chief of the demons, and he makes God an offer. He petitions the throne directly. Lord, he says, do not bind all of them. Leave some of them with me. Leave a portion under my command, so that they can do my bidding, so that I can use them to corrupt and to lead astray the sons of men, because the wickedness of mankind is great, and the work requires them. He's not begging for mercy. He's asking for a workforce. He wants to keep a standing army of demons loose on the earth to keep the corruption running, and he takes that request straight to God. Here's where it gets strange, stranger than anything else on this list, because of the answer. God says yes, not to all of it. The Book of Jubilees is specific about the ratio. 9 parts of the spirits are bound and cast down into the place of condemnation, sealed away exactly as planned. But 1 part, 1/10 of them, is left free, handed to Mastema, to remain on the earth under his authority until the day of judgment. 9/10 sealed, 1/10 loose, by divine grant, in writing. The binding you assumed was total, the sealing this whole video has been describing, was deliberately, officially incomplete from the moment it happened. And notice the reason Mastema gives, because it's the coldest part. He doesn't argue that the spirits deserve freedom. He argues that mankind is wicked enough to need them, that the work of corrupting people requires a standing force to carry it out, and that without his 10th the job can't be done. He frames the demons as a necessity, and the petition is granted on those terms. The 10th part isn't loose because it escaped. It's loose because someone made the case that the world required it. Now go all the way back to the first being on this list, and the question planted there. Yeqon started the corruption, 1 link before the leader everyone blames, and I told you to hold on to a question. If God sealed all of them, why is the world still so full of what they made? This is the answer. The reason sealing the beings never sealed the corruption is that the corruption was never fully sealed to begin with. 1/10 of it was licensed to stay. The demons that trouble the world aren't escapees who beat the system. They're the 10th part that the system, by its own terms, let Mastema keep. When you ask what happens if these beings get out, the Book of Jubilees answers that the worst of them never had to get out. They were granted the exit at the source, right after the flood, by the same authority that sealed the rest. That's the shape of the whole thing, and it's a colder shape than the popular story ever admits. 10 beings, from the whisperer who moved the leader, to the angels cast down for pride, to the giants who dreamed their end, to the one who reached for the name that holds up the sky, to the hero and the monster filed together as the drowned, to the prince who bargained for 1/10 of the dark. The Enoch books didn't give you a simple tale of angels who wanted women and got punished. They gave you a chain, with a beginning nobody names and an ending nobody teaches, and a loophole written right into the seal. So the real question was never whether any of them can break out. The real question is why 1/10 of them were never locked in. 9 parts are sealed under the mountains and the heavens and the abyss, waiting for a judgment that hasn't come. 1 part was handed a key at the beginning and told to get to work. Tell me which of these 10 you'd unseal first, and where in the world you're watching from, and subscribe, because that 10th part is still out there, still working, and the Enoch books have a lot more names in them than the ones anyone ever says out loud.